Okay, in this video we're going to be looking at some of the assumptions we make of consumers and how these things affect consumers' decision making. So the first and main assumption we make of consumers is that consumers are rational and that they think at the margin. So what we mean by consumers being rational is that each consumer wants to maximize their utility from their given income. So if, for example, I walk to the supermarket and there are two different oranges, one selling for $2 and one selling for $4, it would be irrational for me to buy the apple or the orange, that costs $4. Okay, that is not going to maximize my utility. I'm not getting the most out of my income. I am not trying to maximize my net benefits in relation to my net costs. So when we're talking about consumers being rational, we make rational decisions when we successfully maximize the personal satisfaction we make from our choices. Consumers want to maximize their utility for the lowest possible cost. Now we're going to talk about what it means to think at the margin. Okay, thinking at the margin means that a rational person will do something if the extra benefit of doing so exceeds the extra cost associated with that action. So what I mean by that is, if I'm going to the supermarket and again I can buy a kilo of grapes for $5. If the benefit I'm going to get from those grapes is $3, we will assume that my net benefit of $3 is less than my net cost. Okay, therefore we're not going to buy that product. So unless my net benefit exceeds my net cost, I will decide to not buy that product. That's what we mean by thinking at the margin. Okay, well, I'm only going to do something if the benefit exceeds the cost. And that doesn't mean just purchasing things. Again, I might spend an hour, if I decide to spend my hour of my time going for a run, I need to be rational in my mind that the net benefits of going for that run are higher than the net costs. So the benefits I'm going to get from extra fitness, from maybe losing weight, from feeling better because I've gone for a run, outweigh the net costs, or I'm not going to go for a run. Okay, if I decide to go to Queensland, the net benefits of that decision have to outweigh the net costs. And those net costs may be the cost of travel, it may be that what I would have done with that week instead of if I didn't go to Queensland. That's what a rational person will do. So here's an example of thinking at the margin. So say the new Star Wars film's just come out. So I might decide that it's going to cost $10 each time I go to watch Star Wars, and the benefit I get from watching Star Wars the first time is $30. The benefit, that's how much value I put on the product. When I haven't seen it before, when I'm getting excited by all the new scenes and new features of the movie, obviously I'm a massive Star Wars fan, by the way I'm talking, the second time I go watch Star Wars, I'm only going to get $15 benefit. I've seen some of the new exciting scenes, I know the storyline, I'm not going to enjoy it as much as I did the first time. But that's still more than it's costing me, so I might decide to go watch Star Wars a second time. The third time I watch Star Wars, well, I might be a little bit bored, I've seen everything twice, I'm only going to get a benefit of $5. If it's going to cost me $10, then a rational person thinking at the margin will not decide to go the third time, because the net costs exceed the net benefits. That's what thinking at the margin is about, weighing up the net benefits to the net costs and deciding whether it's worth producing that product or going to see that movie or whatever we're talking about. Not producing that product, consuming that product. So again, this idea of thinking at the margin, who's going to be willing to pay more for a drink? A person that's just walked across the desert for 8 hours, or a bloke that just had a glass of Coke 10 minutes ago? If you offer them both a glass of water, obviously man A is going to be willing to pay more. Why? Because the net benefit he gets from that product is much higher. The net benefit might be $100 for that person. And that's why if you look at a Survivor auction, if anyone watches Survivor, they might be willing to pay $300 for a bowl of chips and a beer, because the net benefit they're getting may still be more than $300. Okay, if you offered me a beer and chips now for $300, none of you are going to take that, because the net benefit is not exceeding your net cost. Second assumption, consumers have preferences. All consumers will prefer one alternative to another and are aware of how much satisfaction or utility they are getting from each product. So we assume all consumers have preferences. Economists don't know what people's preferences are. We can't look at people and go, you're going to prefer that over that. But we accept that all consumers have preferences and are aware of the satisfaction they're getting from different products. Consumers are subject to budget constraints. Even the richest people in the world have a limited income and have to devote that to the consumption of only certain goods and services. And we make rational decisions subject to our budget constraints. Other assumptions, individuals face trade-offs, and these ones aren't as important, but any decision that we make faces a trade-off and an opportunity cost of any decision. People respond to incentives. Consumers respond to incentive, producers respond to incentives. And a good example of that is there were universities in America that used to receive funding from the government based on the number of enrolments they had in their university. Now, because of that, they had this big incentive to get all these people to come to their university because they would get more government funding. But they didn't get any more government funding if these people graduated. So there was no incentive. There was less incentive for them to actually, provide a good course, make sure that people graduated, make sure that people got jobs, because their funding wasn't dependent on that. So the government changed the incentive based, and therefore started paying these universities based on the number of graduates. And therefore they changed and responded to the new incentive by making sure that people passed the course. And they put more money into showing that they had successful graduates. So people, businesses, producers, consumers will respond to incentives. And the last one is that consumers experience diminishing marginal utility. And what I mean by that is the more of a good or service that is consumed, the smaller the increase in total utility or satisfaction. And a good example of that is a person eating an ice cream. That's the example that I always use. If the first time I eat an ice cream, I might get $10 of benefit from that ice cream. The second ice cream, I only get $5 benefit. Okay, we're going to get less satisfaction the more we consume a product. And the same example was with the movie that we just talked about. You don't get as much satisfaction the second or third time as you did the first time. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about diminishing marginal utility. The more of a good or service that is consumed per period, the smaller the increase in total utility that is generated from the last unit. Okay. Again, looking at the survivor example, if you offer them a cake, they might pay $300 for the first cake because they're going to get a large amount of benefit. The second cake, they may only pay $20 for because of diminishing marginal utility. That's the assumptions we make of consumers.